Coming up, the Dolphins outscore the Bears and the Jets shock the Bills. This is Locked On Game to Game NFL.
Every game, every team, every angle. Locked On Game to Game, your team every day.
Welcome in. You're listening to Locked On Game to Game NFL, local experts taking you from game to game in week 9 of the NFL season. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. With the Chargers' win over the Falcons on Sunday, there is now not a single winning team in the NFC South at the moment. Atlanta wasted an early 10-0 lead, and they now sit at 4-5. While the Chargers stayed a game behind the division-leading Chiefs with their win. Our Locked On hosts from both sides break down the finish in Atlanta.
I know Chargers fans are checking their blood pressure after that one. The Chargers picked up a big win over the Atlanta Falcons, 20-17. This is David Drogemeyer of the Locked On Chargers podcast, and on offense, Justin Herbert did a great job of spreading the wealth. He had 245 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, also completed 5 passes to 5 different receivers in this one. Had a great performance by Josh Palmer, who's stepped up big in the absence of Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. 8 receptions, 108 yards. Austin Eckler, 2 more touchdowns on 71 all-purpose yards. That's 10 touchdowns in his last 5 games. He's on an absolute tear. On defense, the Chargers gave up a lot on the ground. 201 rushing yards. The Atlanta Falcons ran all day at will, but the Chargers defense came up with the stops when they needed it. Also got a fantastic turnover by Khalil Mack, who dropped back into coverage and ripped the ball right out of Drake London's hands and rumbled back for 45 plus yards. A big win for the Chargers, a win that has the potential to change the trajectory of this season for the Chargers. But for more on this game and for more on the Chargers, please check out the Locked On Chargers podcast, your team every day.
It was another wild finish for the Falcons in a Week 9 loss to the Chargers. I'm Aaron Freeman with Locked On Falcons. It was Falcons versus Chargers in Week 9, so you knew it wouldn't end in a normal way. So with the Chargers driving the game tied 17-17, already in field goal range with a minute left in the game, the big play the Falcons needed, the big stop that the defense needed, came when Rashaan Evans stripped Austin Eckler at the Falcons' 20-yard line. Taquan Graham picked up the loose ball and then ran it 19 yards himself, but then fumbled himself. The ball was then recovered by the Chargers, who proceeded to get all that lost yardage back on the very next play on a 22-yard strike from Justin Herbert to Josh Palmer. That set up the 37-yard field goal that proved to be the game-winning kick from Cameron Dicker, which put LA up 20-17 as time expired. And it's a tough day for the Falcons, given that their offense played reasonably well. They had 200 plus yards rushing on the ground, the 3rd time this season that they've achieved that number, but it wasn't enough to pull out the victory, and the Falcons will find a way to hopefully rebound, given a short week coming up in a rematch against Carolina after that finish in that Week 8 win over Carolina. So we'll have you covered all week long for that matchup, as well as breaking down this Chargers loss on Locked On Falcons, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, every day.
The Dolphins needed all of the scoring that they could get to beat a surging Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears. Yesterday, Miami put up 35 points, and they won by a field goal in the Windy City. Our Locked On Dolphins host goes over what turned into a shootout.
The Miami Dolphins survive a historic performance by Justin Fields en route to a 35-32 victory over the Chicago Bears in Week 9 of the 2022 NFL regular season. The Dolphins' offense was firing on all cylinders early. Tua Tagovailoa finishing with over 300 passing yards and 3 touchdowns, with the Dolphins needing some strong defensive play down the stretch, as Justin Fields set the individual game rushing record for a quarterback with 178 yards rushing. Now, the Dolphins, within structure against the Bears defensively, did a very strong job and included a special teams punt block that was returned for a touchdown in a full team victory over the Bears to push the team's record to 6-3.
The Bengals doubled up the Panthers on Sunday because of the 5-touchdown performance from Joe Mixon, since he took a 35-0 lead into halftime, and Locked On Bengals goes over the blowout.
Joe Mixon carried the Cincinnati Bengals to an important Week 9 win, a demolition of the Carolina Panthers at home going into the bye. I'm Jake Lisco from the Locked On Bengals podcast, and for a team in the Bengals that was among the worst, especially in terms of EPA per play or other efficiency metrics in the running game this year, going against a Carolina team that was one of the best on defense against the run, this isn't something that many saw coming. Joe Mixon sets a Bengals franchise record with 5 total touchdowns in the game, going for over 7 yards per carry, over 200 total yards in the game, as the Bengals put this one to bed early. For more details, for more analysis, and a breakdown of what went right for the Bengals early in this game, we've got you covered over at Locked On Bengals, covering your team every day.
The New York Jets now sit just a half game off the lead in the AFC East after beating the division-leading Buffalo Bills on Sunday. The New York defense smothered Josh Allen and held Buffalo to just 17 points. Our Locked On Jets host celebrating the huge win.
Who would have thought it, but the New York Jets look like contenders in the AFC. I'm John, the host of the Locked On Jets podcast, and the New York Jets pulled off a major upset on Sunday, defeating the Buffalo Bills 20-17 at MetLife Stadium. The Jets improved their record to 6-3 on the season. They entered this game as double-digit underdogs. The game got off to a rough start as Buffalo took a 14-3 lead in the first half, but the Jets fought back. Their defense played outstanding football in the second half. This defense, which has been great all season long, held Josh Allen and the Bills' offense to just a field goal in the final 2 quarters of the game. Then the decisive sequence was a 13-play, 86-yard drive. The Jets got the ball on their own 4-yard line with just under 8 minutes left in the game, and they ran the ball 11 of the 13 plays to get into field goal range, out-physicaling maybe the best defense in the NFL, and Greg Zuerlein added the game-winning field goal. For more on the New York Jets, be sure to check out the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, free and available wherever you get your podcasts every Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
The Titans and Chiefs needed overtime to decide a winner on Sunday night, with the Kansas City defense coming up big to clinch the victory in the end. Locked On Titans and Chiefs recap the last game of the day.
Despite a valiant defensive effort, the Tennessee Titans lose in overtime 20-17 to the Kansas City Chiefs. My name's Tyler Rowland, host of the Locked On Titans podcast. It was a typical storyline for the Titans. Come out, the defense is on fire. The offense finds a way to score some points in the first half, and then a complete collapse of offense in the second half for the Titans. They're unable to score any points, can barely get any first downs. And at the end of the day, this loss isn't on the defense. It isn't even on the rookie backup quarterback, Malik Willis. It is squarely on 2 men. Titans offensive coordinator Todd Downing, for a lack of creative play calling in the second half, does not get Derrick Henry involved, really reduces the amount of read options for Malik Willis to take advantage of his athleticism. The screens to the running backs, that was a small factor, basically no factor in the second half. And then the lack of wide receiver talent is squarely on Titans general manager John Robinson. So 2 guys there really made it tough for the Titans to win tonight, and they weren't able to escape the Patrick Mahomes magic. The Titans lose 20-17. For more analysis, check out the Locked On Titans YouTube channel, where I'll be going live immediately after the game.
It was ugly and it was brutal, but the Kansas City Chiefs got a win on Sunday Night Football in overtime over the Tennessee Titans. I'm Ryan Tracy from Locked On Chiefs, and this was a game that they had to have. This was a hurdle, a team that has been a thorn in the side of this Kansas City Chiefs organization for a couple of years, and one that, quite frankly, plays them very, very tough. The brutality of it is that it is just such a physical matchup, not only for Travis Kelce, but for everybody in the trenches on both sides of the ball. They needed Mahomes' magic to get it done, and that's exactly what he delivered. But they also needed a step up from the defensive side of the ball, and the Kansas City Chiefs defense gave you that. Limiting Henry in the second half, limiting the entire team to a single first down and 22 yards of offense from the halftime whistle all the way through the end of overtime. They got it done and get the W. We'll talk about it all week on Locked On Chiefs, your team every day.
Coming up, Kirk Cousins gets a revenge win, and the Jags make a comeback to beat the Raiders. This is Locked On Game to Game NFL. Today's edition of Game to Game is brought to you by Prize Picks. It's a super simple way to play daily fantasy sports. You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projections, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. You're not competing against anybody else. You are just going against those predictions. So it's super simple to do. You can get it done in less than 60 seconds, and it's really easy. You download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 if you use the promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match of up to $100. Welcome back to Locked On Game to Game NFL. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. Kirk Cousins visited his former team in Washington yesterday, and he got some revenge on the Commanders. He threw for 2 touchdowns on the way to getting Minnesota a field goal win over DC. Both Locked On Vikings and Commanders recap the final from the Capitol.
The Vikings overcome all sorts of odds stacked against them to pull off a 2-score comeback win on the road in Washington to ascend to 7-1. Big time situational Masters game. What's up, everybody? It's Luke Braun from Locked On Vikings, breaking down the Vikings 20-17 victory in Washington. 115 yards for Justin Jefferson, 9 catches for 70 for TJ Hawkinson. Explodes onto the scene for the Vikings. But more than any of that, this was a game where everything went against the Vikings. Huge ref debacle from the Vikings. A couple of ticky-tack calls that you could disagree with, but the big one is the ref actually getting in the way of Cam Bynum as he was going to probably intercept an underthrown post route. Instead, Curtis Samuel takes it and it's a touchdown. Huge swing in the game. They had to overcome that. They had to overcome horrific offensive line play. I wouldn't call that adversity so much as, a problem of their own making, but a disaster class up front, but also a disaster class up front for the Commanders as Zadarius Smith and Danielle Hunter lived in the backfield and made life all kinds of hell for Taylor Heinicke. Ultimately, the Vikings win by being situationally aware, getting rid of the 2-minute warning when the Commanders were out of timeouts, not trying to score with a 1st and goal with like 1:48 to go, and instead kicking a chip shot field goal. Commanders only had 12 seconds. They had no shot. So the Vikings go to 7-1 as they head to Buffalo for a big-time contest against the Buffalo Bills. That will be a heck of a game. But for now, we can enjoy the Vikings being 7-1 and leading the NFC North by 4.5 games. For more on this, you can find the Locked On Vikings podcast wherever you find your favorite shows.
All right, Commanders fans, Chris Russell here. FedEx Field, the Commanders' 3-game winning streak is over. At 20-17, they lose to the now 7-1 Minnesota Vikings, led by quarterback Kirk Cousins, who of course played here at FedEx for the first time in 5 years after leaving as a free agent. Washington was looking good, 17-7. They were up a minute or so into the fourth quarter, and then everything fell apart. The defense, long drive, which led to a Greg Joseph field goal, which made it 17-10. Then Taylor Heinicke made the one killer mistake that he generally makes every game, and it turned into an interception by Harrison Smith, a 35-yard interception return, put the ball at the Washington 12, and 2 plays later, Kirk Cousins found Dalvin Cook over Cameron Curl for a 12-yard game-tying touchdown at 17-17, and then Minnesota, after more inefficiency from the Commanders' offense, got the ball once again, drove all the way down the field, appeared to kick a go-ahead field goal just inside of 2 minutes, but John Ridgway, who was just signed a couple of weeks ago from Dallas, committed a personal foul and a roughness penalty over the center on the snap of the field goal. They wiped the field goal out. The Vikings were able to get a first down, kill off the rest of the clock because Washington only had 1 timeout left. They spent that on the first play. And then they were left with 12 seconds left on the clock and were unable to get in position for a potential game-tying field goal. 20-17, the final score here from Landover as the Commanders drop to 4-5. They go to the Philadelphia Eagles on Monday Night Football next. For more, we'll have a full-length Locked On Commanders podcast from here at FedEx. I'm Chris Russell.
The Jacksonville Jaguars came back from down 17-0 and won with 20 unanswered points against Las Vegas Raiders on Sunday afternoon. Our Locked On Jags host fills us in on what got into Jacksonville in the second half.
Victory Sunday for the Jacksonville Jaguars as they beat the Los Angeles Raiders 27-20 after falling behind 17-0 early. Trevor Lawrence was the model of efficiency, completing 25 of 30 passes for 235 yards. And Travis Etienne went over 100 yards yet again for the third game in a row as the Jaguars had a very measured performance on offense and got great contributions on their defense from Dawon Smoot, the guy that keeps delivering. And if you're a Jaguar fans, the word deliver and Dawon Smoot go together. They win today, ending a 5-game losing streak, and they did it in a very Duval way where they did not quit and they overcame the odds. 27-20, the Jaguars beat the Raiders.
The Arizona Cardinals could not overtake the red-hot Seattle Seahawks and, of course, Geno Smith on Sunday, who won their 4th game in a row, including their 2nd over Arizona. Locked On Cardinals has the recap over Arizona's 4th loss in 5 games.
The Arizona Cardinals lose again, this time 31-21 to the Seattle Seahawks, falling to 3-6 and remaining in the cellar of the NFC West. I'm Alex Clancy with Locked On Cardinals. What we watched today was just another episode in the same TV series we've been watching since week 1. The offense looks brilliant at times and then goes missing. And the defense is left to pick up the pieces, keep the Cardinals in games for the chance that the Arizona Cardinals offense will emerge once again to try and put some points on the board. This offense is not well coached. This defense is. This offense has a lot of talent. The defense, not as much. What we're seeing now is a conflict from a side of the football that should be the strength that isn't, and the other side of the ball that is the strength that isn't equipped to win games for the Arizona Cardinals. It's messy. It's murky. What's coming next? We can talk about it Monday through Friday, free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube.
That's all for today on Locked On Game to Game NFL. Thank you so much for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On NFL and your team's Locked On podcast on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcasts from. I'm Kainani Stevens. This has been Locked On Game to Game.